Everyone, thanks for joining us today. We have another Smith.ai Master Series. I am Maddy Martin, the Head of Growth and Education for Smith.ai. Now, Smith.ai is a 24/7 virtual receptionist and web chat service. We serve small businesses, primarily law firms across the US, Canada, and actually now globally, handling not just calls and chats, but also intake and scheduling, outbound calls and follow-ups. So please check us out, smith.ai, and see how we can help you. But without further ado, excited to introduce you to Charley Mann. The topic today is how to identify your standout advantage and beat the competition. So in a moment, I'll let Charley introduce himself. Charley is the president and lead coach at Great Legal Marketing, and he is going to talk today about injecting your personality into your practice to attract new clients, simple online strategies for creating authority in an oversaturated market, ways you can create your version of a free consultation that's really difficult for another attorney to replicate, how to set yourself up for the best possible option over competing firms, and how to use educational materials to impress potential new clients. So with that teed up, Charley, tell us about yourself and take it away.
Well, Maddy, thank you so much. I'm excited to be back on one of these master series. It's always fun talking with you, talking with the Smith.ai audience, and hello to all the GLM fans and friends who are on here as well. Glad you're here. Make sure you do check out Smith.ai. I mean, there's a reason that we like doing this stuff with Maddy and with Smith.ai, because good people with a service that is much needed in the market. So my background is an interesting one. So Maddy, I'm not even sure if I've had an opportunity to talk with you about this before, but I was actually a theater major coming out of college. And so the reason I want to share that with everyone real quick is I came from the antithesis of business into the business world. So with theater majors, when you've got a collection of artists together, what do all artists actually dream of being? When you ask them, like, what are you going to be someday? You know, what are you going to do? They always talk about suffering for their art, and they talk about being a starving artist. I really never had that dream for myself. Like, I wanted to be a husband and father more than anything else. And that was the most important objective in my world, my life. So when I graduated from college, I started searching around for a bunch of different opportunities. And one of the opportunities was with this guy, Ben Glass. I'll never forget meeting Ben, going into the office for an interview for this wild Craigslist ad he had posted. Do you remember when we all used to use Craigslist a lot more frequently? It seems like a long time ago at this point. And so I went in, I meet with him, and I'll never forget, Maddy, I was wearing like the clothes your dad told you, like, hey, this is how you're supposed to look official for an interview. I'm wearing these black pants that have pleats upon pleats upon pleats upon pleats. You know, it looks like more of a costume from a Ren fair than dress clothes. And then I'm wearing a silver, bright, shiny shirt that basically made me look like a 6'1" fishing lure. And I'll never forget that outfit, because that day I'll never forget. So I go in there, I'm interviewing with Ben. One of the things he does first off is he hands me this book, Outrageous Advertising by Bill Glazer. That book was my first introduction to real marketing. So I didn't come to marketing from the, let's talk about brand awareness, the MBA type of approach to marketing or communications degree. Not that there's anything wrong with any of them, but it meant that I had a totally blank slate. And that might be the case for a lot of folks right here, right now, when we're talking about this idea of what I'll introduce, the standout advantage. You may feel like you're coming from a totally blank slate. I want you to know I've absolutely stood in your shoes in that regard, maybe to an even greater degree, coming out of a point where I didn't know what it was like to be an entrepreneur, be a small business owner, be all of those other things. I just was looking for an interesting place to work. So fortunately, Ben ended up hiring me. He hired me because I had been the featured columnist at Bleacher Report for the Denver Broncos. Go Broncos. And I knew how to hit editorial deadlines. I knew how to do really good writing overall. And that catapulted me into 11 years later. Here I am working with small firm attorneys. And what I never realized until I was introduced to Ben, that the thing that I wanted to bring into the world more was the thing that I desired most, which was true autonomy. the ability to make decisions for myself, by myself, that actually benefited myself. And a lot of times those decisions benefit other people around you. Like selfishly, I want to spend more time with my family. So there are decisions that I make that are about spending more time with my family. Now, of course, they benefit as well. I hope. I'm going to theorize they benefit as well when I'm spending more time with them. We'll let them be the judges of that.
We'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
Thank you. And so I'm willing to make those decisions, and I'm not going to let the rest of the world violate those decisions, because autonomy matters so much. And so that's really what I like doing through Great Legal Marketing, through the work I do in coaching, is helping attorneys build lives of autonomy, where you are not beholden to your law firm. You're not beholden to any part of the law firm, whether the people, the clients, having to get a certain number of clients every single month. How do we extract you from that and have you live a life truly of your making, of your choice? So again, fast forward to here today. And what we're going to talk about is the Standout Advantage, because it is a fundamental part of creating a great law firm. So most law firms don't have a standout advantage. Well, they actually do, they just don't know it yet. This is kind of the good news about this, is you have a standout advantage. You just haven't unearthed it at this point, and you haven't put it to use in your practice. I'm going to give some demonstrations about how you find it. And there's actually a system that we have, the 5 Ps that I'll go through that help us find our standout advantage. And again, this is fundamental, because the whole idea here is you want to stand out from the market. What does most of the market do? They do things like free consultation, or no fee if no recovery, or we are aggressive. All of this is what everyone else is saying. And if everyone else is saying it, you obviously don't stand out, and you can't have an advantage in your marketplace. Every company that builds a great empire, whether locally, regionally, statewide, or nationally, consistently gives people a reason to work with them over anyone else. And in some cases, real simple, right? Coca-Cola, it just tastes better than most other beverages. Sorry to the Pepsi folks. I don't even drink soda anymore. So, you can decide it might be Pepsi. That's fine. For them, that's the whole thing, right? It's people are devoted to that part of it. In a law firm, these things are trapping. They sound good because you're so used to other people saying them. It'd be like if every insurance company started advertising, say 15% or more in 15 minutes or less, like the way that Geico does. Like there, by the way, is a great example of a standout advantage. We're going to save you money, and we're going to give you a specific amount of time in which it's going to take. Specific is good. But if everyone else were doing that, it would erase Geico's advantage. So sometimes, by the way, when you identify a standout advantage in your market, some people may try and duplicate you, and you have to come up with something new. You always have to be thinking about the answer to this one fundamental question. So if everyone on here only writes down this one question, this is the only thing that I would want to guarantee is imparted. So write this down, as they like to say, it's a writer downer. Why would someone do business with me over all other options, including doing nothing? I was having a fantastic conversation with one of our Great Legal Marketing members. So back at the summit, the day one session had just ended. I was talking to this guy, Paul, and Paul was saying he has a relatively big firm that handles about a third of his state and kind of goes statewide. He was saying he doesn't view any other law firm as his biggest competition. He's in personal injury. He views the insurance company as his biggest competition, because most of his clients, his potential clients, have never had someone say, I will write you a $25,000 or $100,000 check. They've never heard that money in one fell swoop in their lives. And they hear that number and they go, oh, yeah, I want to do that. So they'll never even reach out to an attorney. So how do we get to those people? That's that competition of doing nothing. Same thing with like LegalZoom, right? All that other stuff. They don't have to work with an attorney every single time. I remember in probably was about 2013, 2014, you saw pro se bankruptcy filings just start to go through the roof. Pro se became the #1 filing option in most major districts. Bankruptcy attorneys were suffering because they were not answering the question of including nothing. So when you start answering that question, that's where we really get to our standout advantage. So if you only write down the one thing, I'll restate it one more time. Why would someone do business with you over all other options, including doing nothing? Answer that question. Congratulations. You will make money, assuming you do something with it, right, Maddy? Like, that's a big difference. If you come off of this and you kind of like generate answers to the question, but you never make any changes.
Right. You don't let it see the light of the world. Right. Exactly. You have to, and again, if you have more than one thing, wonderful. You have testing that you can do. You can put it into the market, see what gets traction. What do you have a hunch about? And then what's actually validated by the user engagement and conversion rate. Are people booking appointments off of that, or are they just hitting your website and they're bouncing? Because once you have the standout advantage, how do you then reinforce it? If you say, for example, that you're responsive, call us anytime, 24/7, and then you don't pick up, shoot, right? So you also have to make sure that what you identify is not just something that is a hope or dream or in the near future, but it's something you can execute on now as soon as you bring light to it.
Yes, and actually that leads right into the first of the 5 P's. So the first P, and this is going to help people identify their standout advantage. So the first P that we deal with is process. Do you have some kind of specific process that has not yet been highlighted in the market that you can highlight? This is like when you see a car inspection service. Oh, we're going to sell you a used car, and we have our 150-point checklist doohickey. That is their process that they are using as their standout advantage. By the way, a lot of attorneys, should say this, have heard the phrase unique selling proposition. That's kind of the genesis point of this idea of the standout advantage. The reason I've stopped calling it a unique selling proposition is because the focus gets put so much on the point of selection, the sales process, and I found that there's a hurdle that some are reticent to leap over. And this focuses much more on, rather than creating in the sales process unique space, let's create, starting from the very top of the funnel, the top of the marketing funnel, something unique why people would work with us. So we don't have to wait until they're in an appointment to be able to deliver it to them. It's right out front. So standout advantage, that's where we're at with this. So that 150-point checklist, right? It used to be there were only a couple of used car dealerships that would claim something like that because they were the only ones willing to say, hey, just so you know, don't be worried about buying a used car from us. We look over 80 individual items here before we sell you a car. Here's the funny part. When a lot of these used car dealerships started saying things like that, a bunch of other used car dealerships were looking around going, well, we do the same thing.
Exactly.
But only one of them was saying.
Right, and only one of them made it clear and understandable. There's that other guy who's saying, we do all these things and you're using complex jargon, and then the one who wins is the one who doesn't just identify that opportunity, but they execute on it at a level that the customer can understand without further questions that block moving forward into that sales funnel.
Sort of like in personal injury, for example. It's some variation on a standout advantage of, we take over negotiating with the insurance adjuster so you never have to talk with them again. For a lot of people, that sounds great because they're not a trained negotiator. They're nervous about this amount of money. That is a process that obviously every PI attorney does, whether it's a paralegal or an attorney in the office handling it. But usually they don't talk about that stuff until someone is like asking them about the process. They ask, so how does this work? And then they say, oh, well, we're going to handle all the negotiations with the insurance company for you. All of your communications are going to go through us. We're mediating the process. We're in between everything, so you don't have to get stressed out. Let's take that out and make it a front-facing message. Okay.
And one of the other things, Charlie, if we have folks here who are listening in who are saying, I don't know where to start here, right? One of the ways that you can start is by looking at your reviews and seeing what words people use to describe the experience that they had with you and things that surprised them. Often people in reviews, and you could even encourage them to do so in asking for the review, they'll say, here's what I was expecting when I was approaching working with an attorney, and here's what the experience was actually like that surprised and delighted me. Pull those kernels out, see the common values and keywords that they use, and use that to form sort of the basis or foundation for your standout advantage.
And sometimes it's as simple as like a phone answering process, for example. Hey, when you get on the phones with us, we're going to ask you 5 questions and be able to give you the strategy and set a strategy for your case. And so as long as you've got that, again, like Maddy was saying, dialed into an actual process and you have your 5 questions, that's a great example of putting a process out front. We're going to perform our 5-question analysis of your case in less than 15 minutes, to borrow the Geico thing, and you will have a strategy going forward, whether you work with us or not. So
Absolutely.
That's a way to stand out from your competition, because most of your competition is never going to say, oh, you can go work with someone else. No, they want you to work with them. It makes sense. I understand that. Even I'm empathetic towards that. So,
well, what you're saying is also there's something of immediate value. There's a reason to talk to us because you have to get the person on the phone. And then from there, it's way easier. Getting that person to commit to speaking with you is the hardest thing. Once you're on the phone, then you know how to take it. You know how to have that conversation and you know how to identify, is that a good potential client or not? Are you going to refer them out? The other thing is, from a referral standpoint, just as a very brief, sort of aside, if you have your standout advantage and you are consistent in relaying that message, your referral partners also have an easier time of recalling what it is that makes you stand out, and you're more present in their mind, which only benefits you as well.
And then the next, I will also mention with process, to add another P into all of this, put proprietary language around it whenever possible. No one else can invade your space if you're setting the rules of the game. You own the game if you've set the rules. I think I was listening to actually Dan Sullivan earlier today, part of the mastermind group that we're part of. Dan was doing a guest presentation. He was talking about you own the game. When you set the rules, you own the game. And that's a big thing. When you set the proprietary language around your process, no one else can have that exact process, at least not in name. So you've changed the game. All right. The next P is passion. I'm going to use a practical example to describe this one. So we have this wonderful member. His name's Andy. Andy comes up to me at the summit. It was the year before last, so the 2019 summit. And Andy was he's apoplectic. He was like, Charlie, I cannot figure out what my standout advantage is. I feel like I'm every other attorney. I don't have different pricing. I don't have yada, yada, yada. Okay, Andy, let me back out of this question real quick and just tell me about yourself. And so he was going on, he was saying like things that he likes to do. And he kind of offhand mentioned, I love taking therapy dogs to the hospital. I was like, oh, Andy, do you know how big the population is of dog lovers? You love doing charitable work with dogs. That is your standout advantage, something you are passionate about, something that you really care for. Use that front and center. You should have a tab on your website that says, we support therapy dogs, that if people click on that, they can see photos of you, your team members, etc., in the hospital, taking therapy dogs, meeting patients, a video of the whole process, etc. That is your standout advantage. You care so much about this work that you are doing. Make it that. We had another member in Maryland who he loved hunting. That was his whole thing. He loved hunting. He was in estate planning. Well, there are a lot of affluent people who love hunting. Put hunting more forward for yourself. Start using hunting language, talk about, the tracking down your prey or whatever it is. I'm a very bad hunter, which is why my terminology is garbage on this. But, dig into all of that. What's it like to track prey? What's it like to actually, take your trophy photo, et cetera. Use whatever you can there and put that front and center. Use images of yourself out hunting, or maybe you with a couple of clients. Take clients out hunting with you. Just ingrain it into your culture overall. The other thing about a standout advantage is it doesn't have to be a single statement. That's the other thing about the USP, unique selling proposition, is so often people want to boil it down to a single statement. Standout advantage can be a statement, or it can be an entire culture that you have. It's a reason that people are attracted to you. The reason they look at you and go, why do I really feel like I want to do business with that person in particular? Like Andy, the therapy dogs. I'm a dog person through and through. I'm a sucker for dogs. I see something like that sticks with me. That gives me reason to meet with that person. Even more importantly, it gives me a conversational starting point. Your clients have so few conversational starting points with you that if you can hand them one, if they can reach out and say, hey, I saw Andy really loves therapy dogs. Oh, by the way, I had a car accident. Or they meet with Andy and they go, oh my gosh, that picture of you with that little spaniel meeting the lady who was in a traction device at the hospital. I loved it so much. Now you have common ground. You can talk about that, and it doesn't just have to be about the legal issue. That actually becomes secondary to the bond you build with folks. So total difference maker if you can use your passion. Plus, isn't marketing a lot more fun when we can talk about the things that we actually like?
It's a lot more genuine too. A lot of folks who went to law school didn't also go to business school and haven't had the opportunity to sometimes even take these mastermind and coaching programs, like obviously Charlie, you do. And it's essential to understand marketing and business and growth tactics and strategies so that you can take your expertise and better communicate it to the marketplace. Right? And then live and breathe it. Maybe you have a passion for dogs. Well, that's just not the headline or an icon part of your logo on your website. It's also built into your social media strategy. It's built into your voice online. How do you weave that in? If it's not something that you feel you can weave in, if you can't write 10 blog posts off the top of your head, at least the titles about that subject, then maybe that's not your standout advantage. So if you pull on it, if you really try and pull on that thread and say, how much do I have here? You should have a lot of thread to pull on. And that really will help indicate that that is a good fit for you and not just superficial.
Yeah. And you know what, let me talk a little bit about if you're really passionate about the law, because let's be fair to that side as well. The attorneys who genuinely love the law. So we have a guy who's part of our Icon Accelerated group, which is for firm owners that have $1 million or more practice. And it's about how do you multiply that million and turn it into a self-sustaining owner independent business. And he's in there and he loves litigation. Loves litigation. I mean, he loves going to loves Jerry Spence, goes to Mark Lanier's trial school, all that stuff. Anytime that someone is having trouble with like, hey, we're dealing with this particular insurance company, he's like, read this book, Running with the Bulls, for example. We talked about Running with the Bulls at the last meeting just last week. So for him, a potential standout advantage can be drawn from that passion. Here's the issue: is most times it comes across with that wording I had earlier, like we're aggressive. Now, if you can find an actual, and sort of skipping ahead here, I'll whisper it real quick. One of the pieces, proof, we're going to talk about that in a moment. If he can prove how much he loves the trial work by saying, we try on average twice as many cases as other law firms, as other attorneys. And obviously you got to find statistical evidence for a claim like that, right? You don't play games with any of that stuff. You need real hard evidence to demonstrate his passion. Or you talk about how all of the attorneys are required to attend 4 weeks of trial school every year. That's the beginning of using the law as your passion, because if you're truly passionate about it, it's going to come across as more than just we're aggressive. It's going to come across as this is my life's work right here, and my life's work happens to make a dramatic impact on your life, and that's like a magical combination. So that's passion. The next one is your personal story. One of our member that we had a while back, he is in Ohio. He's in Toledo, Ohio. His son got into a really nasty accident at a swimming pool that caused pretty severe brain damage. And what he did is so he ended up having to go through the process of, I think it ended up being a product liability issue. He's filing lawsuits, having to deal with being the parent in that moment more than being the lawyer. So he wrote a book called I've Stood in Your Shoes. It was all about his personal story dealing with this and saying, I get it. I've gone through this. And by the way, as an attorney, I felt almost as lost as you do, even though I know this stuff. Because it's different when it's your own kid. It's different when it's your own family. So I am really there. When I say that I get it, I'm not paying lip service to it. I have stood in those shoes. That was so powerful. We have another guy, Howard Spiva, who there was a murder in his family. And so he has a huge personal story that he can use to connect with people and to say, this is why I went into law, right? If you can answer that question with a big story, this is what got me into law. So one of my private clients does elder law, and he started doing it because when he was much younger and in law school, he started seeing his own grandparents sort of struggling with the transition of, they might be going into a nursing home. So there might be additional planning needs right there, Medicare planning needs for them, and all of the contingencies and then the stress that placed on his parents. And so he realized, I would love to continue to solve that problem going forward. Fortunately, he had an entrepreneurial brain and he was always thinking about I want to open my own practice, because a lot of attorneys graduate from law school and they're sort of they're going to do transactional or they're going to do litigation, or maybe hourly work. He ended up figuring out ahead of time, I want a business, I'm going to do estate planning and elder law. So that's what drove him there, a personal story. He tells that story probably a couple hundred times a year, and it keeps paying off. That's actually the beauty of a personal story, is you can tell it over and over and over again. It continues to pay off. The only person who actually gets bored of it is you, the person telling the story. This is where, by the way, I see a lot of law firms start to lose opportunity in the market because they've established this great story, something interesting for people to connect with. And they start thinking, everyone's heard this. Oh, this is boring. Oh, I feel like I'm telling the same story over and over again. Maybe this is the theater major, but just learn how to perform it, because it's brand new every single time you have a new audience. You are not recognized in your entire area. There are people who don't know about you, and you need to connect with them just as powerfully that first time that they meet you as you did with client number one that you told the story to.
Not to mention the fact, Charlie, that we know as marketers that there is a lot of importance on impressions, right? And what I mean by impressions is you don't just hear something once and already know it, you know it forever. You need to hear it 5, 10, 20 times now. The number keeps going up as the media we absorb every day increases. And if you are getting tired of it, you might actually be reaching a point where you have a consistent message, which is good. And you are reaching a point where people are recognizing you and people are responding to it, because you're going to keep doing it. If you feel like you need to pivot, then you can pivot. But if you're at the point where maybe you're a little bit tired of it, first of all, there's always another way of layering onto it or framing it a slightly different way as you feel it evolves with your practice. But tiring of it, Charlie, as you're saying, is not a bad sign. It also means that you don't ever have that feeling in the pit of your stomach when someone asks you, well, what do you do? And why should I choose your firm over another one? You have a gut reaction, right answer, that you're not going to stumble over your words and betray the good work that you do at your firm because you don't come out of the gate shining, right? That's a way to get the conversation going on a really strong foot and then allow you to have a conversation because you've hooked them from it.
And then your story, whether it's the process, passion, or personal story that we've talked about so far, one of the next two pieces that we're going to talk about, one really important thing is, even if it is a unique story to you, everyone in your law firm should be able to tell that story from heart. Everyone should be able to say, here's Maddy's story. Let me tell you why you should work with us. When this firm was founded, it was founded by Maddy, and here's why she founded it. You can give them like 90% of the same power that you have when telling the story, just by getting them to know it. And they should love it. Like when I talk about Ben, for example, I will always talk about Ben being a dad to 9 kids, 4 of whom were adopted from China, 2 of which deal with serious trauma-related issues from their time in orphanages. And he's still parenting them, and he'll parent them well into their adulthood. And that's what makes Ben an incredible person. So when we talk about we're really helping attorneys create a law firm that is great for their families, that's where it comes from.
And so, Charlie, I mean, I want to also emphasize that for anyone who is watching this, who's thinking, I don't have a remarkable TV commercial story, right? And there are probably people here who are thinking, this isn't me. I didn't have a terrible accident or murder in my family or massive event that is the root of this story. That's totally okay. And maybe there's even a story that you don't want to or you're not ready to share. This is not to force you to get that out. Your Standout Advantage doesn't require that of you, but there is always something that can be drawn out if you try and you do the exercise of trying to write these different variables or mini stories or feelings that you have about what brings your passion to your practice. For example, my father was an attorney in his first career, and he was in law school, and it took him to the 3rd year to realize that he loved, get ready for it, corporate tax law. And why was that? He loved it because it was the very first thing that he was really good at, and something clicked. So it doesn't have to be a catastrophe. It doesn't have to be a heart-wrenching story. It doesn't have to be, puppy love. It could just be, I am great at this thing. And for my whole life, I didn't find what I was great at until I found corporate tax law, and I'm darn good at it, right? Just brag about yourself and have that clear line. And that can be as simple as your story. So it doesn't have to be a Disney movie, doesn't have to be a R-rated movie. It could just be, this is authentic to me and this is why I'm here. You just have to encapsulate it.
Yeah. And sometimes when I talk to people about their stories, what I ask them to do is just, sometimes it can be a client back when, how many attorneys opened their law firm and they were general practice, right? And then they had a client who came in and they changed that client's life. And they're like, I want to do this one thing from now on. This is all that I want to do, because everything else has been just work until this moment. And that's that same idea of it all clicking in, and actually that kind of dovetails really well into the 4th P, which is position or positioning. One great way to stand out from others is to have a firm market position, such as being a specialist. Being a specialist can do so much for you. To say, like in the case of your dad, corporate tax law, it's what we do, it's all that we do. That right there, that is a strong position in the market. Position is usually defined by sort of, you become an immovable object in what you do. And sometimes it's a contrary stance, right? It might be within estate planning that you sort of view, Dave Ramsey did this really well with the way that he handles finances. Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, kind of this contrary view in the midst of everyone talking about like leveraging debt and everything. They came out and they said, no debt, debt's terrible. That is my immovable position here. You will not change my mind. People are so attracted to that. They love when you come into it and you say, I am firmly rooted. This is what we are great at. I have other people who can do other things out in the universe, but man, you want this, only come here. And obviously we can improve position with positioning through books, reports, webinars, etc. But it starts with having a firm position on something. So when you have something that you're firmly rooted in, like if you know what we do is we do high net worth estate planning. We only work with people who have a net worth of $10 million or more and at least 5 properties. That's a firm position. That's a standout advantage because people will go, well, that's me. You're the only one who's talking straight to me. I'm going to work with you. It's like, this is one of the greatest examples. It's like if you go to a party, especially, if you're just kind of dipping below the Mason-Dixon line, if you go to a party and you wear a bolo tie, there's going to be a certain number of people in that room who go, I want to talk with that person and only that person. Because they weren't necessarily brave enough to wear a bolo tie themselves, but they're a bolo tie person, and they are going to walk to you and they are going to talk to you, and you already know you're going to have things in common, which is what makes them so happy. That's taking a sartorial position, but a position nonetheless. You can combine position, obviously, with a lot of other spaces, but the biggest advantage here with position is it's got to be, and I used this word earlier, it better be specific. It better be specific and easy to understand. In personal injury, it's not enough to just say, we do car accidents and only car accidents. You want a strong position, you're talking about, we are masters of handling Uber accidents and other rideshare accidents. And you can have multiple positions that you take, by the way. So we're masters at that. We're masters at motorcycle accidents. These are all ways to start standing out over your competition, because inevitably, actually, I should dig into this point here. Inevitably, when you take a position, this is why I have the hardest time getting a lot of law firms to follow the position route, despite its total power. When you take a position, what ends up happening is you're drawing a line between those who will and those who won't work with you. There will be a group of people who will work with you and only you, and you will barely have to do any marketing to get them to show up at your doorstep and beg for you to work for them. But there will be people who now will just say, no, I'm not going to work with that person. Frankly, even with your passion. So for Andy, with his dog practice, with the therapy dogs, he might turn off some cat people. But you will get so many more of the folks who just look at that and go, I have to work with this firm, that it easily overrides. But I think a lot of business, I know a lot of law firm owners and a lot of business owners at large are more afraid of what they could leave behind than they are excited about by what they can gain.
So Charlie, another thing here is that, with everything that you drop, you leave an opportunity for a compliment and a referral to your practice. And what I mean by that is, let's take your dog law firm example, right? You only work with dogs, no cats. So I'm taking your metaphor a little bit, further than you did, but that's fine. We see things in sort of black and white here, right? So you've got a dog law firm, you say, oh, sorry, no, we don't work with cats, refer them out to the cat law firm, right? So then the cat law firm also gets dogs and refers them to you, and you're not losing any business. You're just getting more of the business that you do want, and you're creating a strong bond so that you have an exchange that is known and consistent with your other referral partners that sends you more of the clients you want. And over time, you have less unpredictable noise in your sales funnel.
You know what, actually, and with the referral area as well, I will say, going back to process, interestingly, this is a way that Ben Glass Law, so the firm that Ben founded and still owns, made more money with its referrals, is because with referral partners, what we started doing was basically saying, we have a process for how this works. When you refer a case to us, we know how to handle everything. We know what you need to sign. We're going to get it to you fast and efficiently. We know you're going to know what the payment structure is on this. You're also going to be able to select what level of updates you want. Some people want to hear every month. Some people never want to hear except for a check that shows up to them. But we have a process for how this works. And that gave a standout advantage to Ben Glass Law to get more referrals to the practice. Because yes, other firms may know the law, may know the ethics rulings, et cetera. We said, well, we've got dialed into a science here. Voila, you're never going to have to worry. And that is very, very attractive. This, by the way, is, I see this. So a couple of years ago when I purchased my home, there was absolutely zero process to the way that my realtor handled things, because he, like most realtors, just sort of thought that I knew it all already. You know, he's tossing around terminology. He's saying, oh yeah, you know, don't worry, we're going to go ahead and do X, Y, and Z. And, you know, he was talking about the showings. He was talking about the open houses and all this. It's like, it never felt like there was an actual process. Now, I enforced my own process on him, which stunned me, because he just bent over backwards on it. I was like, well, this is amazing. I'm getting my way. I would never want to be a realtor for that reason alone. My whole thing on autonomy at the beginning, so I can't sacrifice that autonomy no matter how much money there is. But he could have changed it all, not only in terms of his some type of market advantage. He could have changed his relationship to me and my willingness to make demands on him if he had a process for things, because I would have followed the process, because I was referred to him. So I was like, all in line.
Is uncertainty, right?
Yep.
I mean, if you have a referral relationship that is strong, you know, uncertainty around volume is one thing. Uncertainty around process is something you can control.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last P that I want to talk about is proof. This is one that a lot of attorneys, I do it last because I want the cogs to have been going really hard on the first 4, because otherwise this is the easiest one that we often default to. This is about stats right here. Statistically provable evidence of superiority. That's what I want to generate here with proof. Statistically provable evidence of superiority. Do you have the most 5-star reviews in the state? Have you gone through and you've done the research against all other bankruptcy firms in the state? And you know that on Google, you have the most 5-star reviews compared to anyone else. Statistically provable evidence of superiority. Do you have the most AVO reviews, back when we were all directing people towards AVO, for example? Those days are kind of over now. You know, have you gotten, we had a member in Texas, criminal defense, and he was able to statistically prove that he had the best win rate on DUI cases in the county, because they published information about it. And he saw he was number 1, his partner was number 2. So they had proof. That obviously is crazy powerful. But at the very least, with proof, you need to stack up testimonials, you need to stack up case studies, you need to create evidence. It's not enough just to say we got this one good review. It's half of our reviews talk about customer service, or 90% of people who write a review about us mention their first point of contact. Some type of actual number that you get to put down. Not people click in on numbers really, really fast. Now, it's important to note that with numbers, there are good numbers and there are bad numbers. What I mean by this is when you have and I'll use prices as an example. When you have something that is, say, $1,000 and you're taking $150 off of it, you're actually better off saying, I'm taking 15% off. So you have to know numbers in the audience, and there's kind of a lot of evidence, a whole a baseline of information on that you'll need to research. But when you set your proof, make sure you set it right. For example, saying that you have, even if it's the most reviews, saying that you have 7 5-star reviews, that's like, no, that's
right. No thanks.
Right. My niece's self-published Kindle book has 7 5-star reviews.
Nothing that you sit over, you know, tea with your grandma and talk about, but actually you would put on a billboard. Right.
On the other hand, if those 7 reviews are the most in your zip code, most is a usable statistic. I know it's not actually a technical number or statistic, but that's how it plays in someone's head. When most people hear most, they put it at 75% or higher. So most 5-star reviews in our area. And then you put a little asterisk by it. You said defined by 5-star reviews of law firms handling bankruptcy cases in 22033. That's how we handle that. Again, statistically provable. Otherwise, someone's going to report it. The bar association is going to come and give you one of those letters that you never want to receive. So proof. But if you can draw a statistic out, it's obviously very, very powerful. But I don't necessarily want everyone to default there, because not many law firms have this advantage. But when they hear something like this, because it's empirical, they go right for it, right? They go right for, I'm gonna dig into proof. So that's why I put it last, because you really can get the process is very easy. You can discover a process very fast. Your passion, sometimes it takes like a little bit of business therapy session to get it out, like it did for Andy. You know, it's the work I do with my private
That's your interim solution?
Yes, yeah. So you can find your passion there. If you have a personal story, click that in, a position, and then proof. So between those 5 P's, you can absolutely find a standout advantage. But like we mentioned earlier, Maddy, you have to put it to use. It needs to be big and bold on your website. It needs to be part of any follow-up sequences. It needs to be part of the way that people talk on the phone. It should be exhaustively ingrained into your culture, this standout advantage. Otherwise, it just goes to waste. What always bums me out, and this is why we have, you know, our programs to try and get members accountable to actually doing all this stuff, is because there's so many good ideas out there. But the bridge, the gap between idea and implementation, is where we watch people just die. We watch law firms. I've talked to people who have the best ideas and they never do anything with them. Now, whether that's you doing something or you hire someone to do with those ideas, I don't care. I don't care how you build the bridge across, but you've got to build that bridge. And it's really important for anyone that works with like a web development company. And what I mean by works with, they're hiring a web developer, you know, someone to do the website and stuff. It's so important that the standout advantage comes from the owner of the law firm. Otherwise, you're leaving your fate into the hands of everyone else, into the hands of the person running your pay-per-click. You need to define this, because no one else can accurately define it for you. Here's what happens if you let someone else define the entire thing for you. You give up on it in 6 months. I know this because I've seen it time and time again. They're like, yeah, I worked with this great consultant. He came in and he told me what my unique selling proposition is, yada, yada, or what it should be. That's even better. He told me what my unique selling proposition should be. And then I talk with him 6 months later, and it's like, yeah, no, we kind of gave up on that. Right, because you didn't own it. You didn't own that. You have ownership.
What do you see, Charlie, also that, you know, if someone else is coming up with it, there is no trust that they haven't pitched that to 20 other firms and 20 other markets? I mean, how do you know that you actually have that as your own, and you could expand into those other markets if you want to, into other practice areas? That's another thing to consider. Is there continuity if you were to add more practice areas for you to have that stake in the ground, that standout advantage, or will you have to pivot that positioning if you do expand into other practice areas? That's something that we're seeing right now amidst the COVID pandemic. And, you know, people are adding estate practices, people are adding family law, other areas. And that's something to consider. If that's on your mind, go more towards something that's flexible, that allows you to make that pivot without a wholesale change. The other thing is, consider what is the iconography, what are the colors, what is the design that is cohesive with your standout advantage. And you know, lastly, you also want something that, for another P, has a sense of permanence. So if you feel a strong sense that this is something that's been with you for a very long time, you had a family catastrophe, et cetera, it's something that's rooted deeply in you, great, there is permanence there. Until you get to that point, try a few different things, and also be careful about, again, Charlie, as you said, the reviews. You want to have a gap between you and the next front runner, because if you buy that billboard for a 6-month buy and you're no longer standing in that same position, that's troublesome. So make sure that you can maintain that position that you're committing to. Maybe you say we have over 100 5-star reviews or something like that, or the, you know, a broad reach in these counties. serving a larger population than anyone else, probably going to be hard to immediately compete with you on that front to get a bigger footprint. But think about like, how permanent is that? And what can you commit to from a marketing standpoint? Is it difficult to change? Is it costly to change or not? It's easy to change the copy on your website. Sure, you could update your logo if it's embedded with that. Maybe it's a dog logo. Stranger things have happened. I actually know a lawyer who has that. But think about, what is the cost to me of changing this? It's easy to play with the copy. It's not so easy to play with a billboard and other investments. So create a small group. If you're not already in a mastermind, have a small group that you can, bounce ideas off of, have a coach that you can bounce ideas off of, so that you're gut checking your ideas. You're not stumbling into any cultural insensitivities that don't just, create a tribe for you, but may create some challenges for you. Be aware of that, and then iterate early on. And once you put a stake in the ground, then you invest in those things that are more immovable.
Mm-hmm. And then, I will say, permanence for your core standout advantage obviously makes a big difference, because it allows you to eventually move the company to someone else. Someday you might want to sell this darn thing. Someday you might want to be partially retired, where you're collecting a lot of money, but you are not heavily involved in the practice. When you have that sense of permanence, you're creating an asset in your practice. You're not renting your marketing anymore, you're owning your marketing. That's a huge differentiator. Now, being said, when COVID struck last year, there were a lot of people who created a new process of how to onboard clients. And that quickly became a standout advantage for some folks. We mastered the online sign up for clients, the no contact sign up. That for some was a potentially short-lived or maybe long-lived standout advantage. Real quick, I noticed there's a question from Scott on there. Apparently he was answering a phone call during this. Scott, beyond the question, and by the way, I agree with Maddy's answer. I won't say to bring the question out, but you should have your life structured where if there's something going on like this, no phone calls come to you, right? So this is actually totally other tangent thing, but as long as we have an opportunity to do another lesson, I'll tell you, Scott, that if you want to make an immediate difference in your life, rather than the third-party marketing website type of stuff, I would focus on how do you structure your life around getting zero unplanned inbound phone calls. That's one of the first things that we do with members. Oh, by the way, that's actually a unique communications policy that Ben Glass came up with, and he's used for a long time. Lots of our members use it, and we use it as a standout advantage. And here's how that works, Maddy, is someone comes to us and we say, hey, just so you know, whenever you need to talk to an attorney, you will be able to. However, you do have to schedule that call. Our attorneys do not take any unplanned inbound phone calls. I'll tell you why. Because you wouldn't want, when one of our attorneys is working on your case, you wouldn't want them getting interrupted. So they won't be interrupted. When they're working on your case, they are working on your case. Nothing else is taking up their time. And that ends up being another advantage for people who work with us. That is a position contrary to the norm of the market. No one else is using that type of communication policy. All right.
So there's another question about Avo, and it's coming to sort of full circle discuss like online reviews, right? And one thing here that I will mention, and I'll say it instead of typing it, you want to have a diverse set of online reviews. No matter where people look for reviews, they see your law firm and it is, highly recommended. It's 5 stars across the board, at least 4 on an average rating. And you're responsive to them. You want to acknowledge those reviews and say thank you and show that you've got some life to you, right? Because we're talking about your standout advantage. Well, you can put that up on a website, but if there's no social media, if there's no review response, if there's no life to your brand, then you are going to miss something, right? It's not just about throwing it out there and then letting it sit and have people just come to your doorstep. You have to show that you're alive and well and thriving and paying attention. And that's really what sort of seals the deal sometimes. But the question was around, Avo, and that brings up a bigger question of what happens when you lose traction because a third-party site just isn't doing as well as maybe it once was, or there's a buyout or whatever happens. Another reason to dial back into your brand and the properties that you own, you have control of your website. You don't have control over Avo being successful, over Facebook being overtaken by the next great marketing Goliath, right? So don't discount the things that you own and always sort of center back to that. That's why Charley is saying the proof, you want to make sure you're assembling that and representing it on your website, because you don't know all the various channels that people are finding you online, but you want to be the final say on.
Yeah. It's an interesting question regarding, any company and how much you're putting your eggs in their basket. As we did see with Avo, and maybe this is an exclusive for the folks who are on here, and we'll cut this out or something because, what we saw is an SEO issue that ended up happening. And so for some of the searches like personal injury attorney near me, they suddenly dropped off of page one. Like that's not slanderous or anything. That's evidence.
It was across the board, right?
Yeah. What we did see is they are still around. If someone searched specifically for, say, Ben Glass, they will be able to see his Avo page somewhere on the first page.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But we don't currently put new reviews really into Avo at Ben Glass Law, simply because there's already over 100 on each of our attorneys' pages. And so we've reached a threshold, that 3-digit threshold, that the amount of the ROI that we get on a new Avo review is minute compared to the real return that we get from yet another Google review that might be keyword rich, that allows us to get better categorized, etc. Now, we also try and put maybe the occasional one towards Facebook. I will say that we don't really do Yelp, because if you're a criminal defense firm, do Yelp. I'll say that much. Even some estate planners can get away with Yelp. Even a little family. PI, we technically have, Ben Glass Law technically has something like 17 or 18 reviews on Yelp, except 75% of them are in the not shown area.
Right. And that's at Yelp's discretion. Yet again, why, I agree with you. Google is the, #1 place to be asking for reviews. And then, and we have a great webinar on reviews from Nice Job from Curtis Davey there. So go check that out on our YouTube. We also have a copywriting webinar that we did last week that will be on there as well, which are great compliments to this class today. So again, yes, Google, absolutely. Facebook is a good complement. Make sure that you're distributing and asking for reviews on the primary channels where people cite that they heard about you, or where your referral partners are mentioning you. People are recommending you on Facebook. That's a reason to get your reviews up on Facebook, because it's basically a search engine now. With that said, we have 1 minute, so let's close out and just say thank you to you, Charley. And how can people reach you? Obviously, I will follow up with everyone who actually registered by email for this and provide your information. But for anyone who's watching who wasn't on that email list, how do we get in touch with you? What else do you offer?
Yeah, so at Great Legal Marketing, we run, well, first off, we have kind of some base level programs, the Hero program, which is to help 6-figure firms get to 7 figures. And we have our Icon program, which is to help 7-figure firm owners multiply that number and turn it into an owner-independent, self-sustaining business, right? One where you can separate yourself, decouple the time-money link that might be holding you hostage in your practice. So I'm going to go and punch in my email address in there for those who want to reach out directly. And on those, we have what we call our accelerated programs, which are mastermind programs associated with Hero and Icon. And I would strongly recommend folks look at those programs. It's how you go farther, faster. And then on top of that, I do some private coaching. My roster slots are relatively limited. So I ask that if you're interested in that, if you're serious about one-on-one coaching, first off, you must actually be a member, but you can become a member as part of becoming a private client. If you're serious about that, reach out to me directly. Or if you're serious about, I'm looking for a mastermind group, I need people to collaborate with. I need folks who get this, who are on my journey, who will be able to help me get there. You go fast alone, but you go farther together. So if you want to go places together with a group of like-minded attorneys and you want to do it with a system, the systems that we have, reach out to me directly and we'll find a time to talk and we'll figure out, hey, is this a good fit for you, right? Where are you at? What's the next step of your journey? How do we get you there and how fast can we go together? So yeah, reach out to me directly. If you're just interested in looking at the programs themselves, go to greatlegalmarketing.com and you'll find info there. But otherwise, for the folks who are like on this webinar right now, just reach out to me directly. I'll put you in the right direction.
Awesome, Charlie. It's a pleasure as always having you. When I send the follow-up in the show notes, I will provide also the link to the first webinar that Charlie did with us, which is how to scale up to a 7 to 8 figure law firm. And he goes through a lot of really interesting math there. So that is a must-watch session as well. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time. And Charlie, appreciate you a ton. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Maddy. This is awesome as always. It's always good to talk with like-minded individuals, and you guys provide a great service. So it's been great to get these opportunities.
Thanks. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.